we became convinced as a leadership about a year and a half ago, maybe a little less than that, but a year ago, that we as a church, if we were going to reach Seaford and our surrounding area with the good news of Jesus, we were going to have to do it in a different way. And so we began to pray about that. We began to lean in. Again, remember we talked about when you need to do something new, you got to seek God. So we were like, God, what do you want us to do? And so we came up with this idea that the thing that we felt like God was saying is, we want you to plant a missional outpost. If you've been around, you've been hearing about this probably for a whole year now. And a missional outpost was simply a new expression of our church in the community because so many people in the community will never come here. Because this method of gathering on a Sunday morning will not reach about 2/3 of the population. And so we said, well, we need to be going where they are, and we want to serve them where they are, but we had no idea what that looked like. And so if you remember, we've been talking about this. In 2022, last year, we said, well, there's some pieces to this. We need to begin to talk to you guys about it. We talked to our leadership. We talked to the church. We began to pray specifically for, like, what direction are we going with this? And God, we need somebody who can own this. We had to identify a potential ministry focus. We began to talk about that and kind of build an early financial plan. And then we got into this year and said, well, we need to, one of the first things is to hire a new pastor for the Outpost. And God graciously, through a whole providential way, connected us with Mike and Jody and the family, and they came on here mid-year. And now we're trying to bring this in a regular communication to the church. But that's only got us so far. And so now we begin the hard work. And so what we wanted to do in the last couple of minutes is just give you an update on where we're at, because new methods, same gospel, same Jesus, but we're going to have to do it differently. And so it's very early, because people have been asking Mike, what are we going to do? He's like, I've only been here 6 weeks, okay? So it hasn't been that long, but there are some ideas that we think that God is doing. So why don't you walk us, Mike, through some of this? We'll just have a dialogue, because what we've done is, then the first question that Mike and I have been talking about is, so what are we doing, and who, in fact, is the target for this missional outpost? So why don't you walk people through this?
Yeah, so, am I on? Good. So one of the things that I believe God has opened up doors, right? God has given me a sense of a passion for those in the school district, in the school, and why not use the gifts that God has given you and passions? I want to step into the realm of that. It's not totally exclusive to that, but it is one of those avenues that God said, hey, listen, I've equipped you, I've given you abilities, and let's press into that. So one of the things that we and what God has called us as an ARAC family, I believe, is to begin to look at some of the short-term goals. Is how do we reach our teenagers and middle and high school age? How do we begin to do that? How do we begin to invite them into our world, but they invite us into their world, such as like Stuff the Bus, coaching, teaching, subbing, mentoring, saying hello on the beginning school day, all those sorts of things. God has just began to open up the door. Actually, I believe not even open them. He's just like pushing them open, saying, church, come and be a part of this. And so those one of the ways is reach teenagers, but also those, as you may know, I am involved with students already, and many of them don't have a very good way of communicating English. And so their first native language is whatever it is. And so we talked about, and may be able to assist with, is ESL training, English as a second language. So when they go to the store, or they go to a job, or they go into a sports world, or they go into the classroom, they would be able to communicate like many of their other peers may have.
Right, that's a big issue in our town.
It's a huge issue. And so, and then long term is obviously working with their families. If we can reach our kids and say, you know, we have ESL programs, we can meet your student where they're at, perhaps the student will then begin to say, hey, families, won't you come and join us as well as we offer these services.
Now understand that some of what he's talking about is we're looking for movement. We want to move into this. We want to begin to engage what God is doing. It doesn't mean this is the permanent. God will orchestrate things as we go, but we believe that that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the stuff that God is saying is we need to engage with with teenagers, with those who, you know, English is not their first language, and then by extension their families. And some of the ways that Mike's already mentioned is doing this through things like tutoring and mentoring and other stuff.
Yeah, tutoring, coaching, transportation, delivery. These are some of the short-term, long-term things. That's why you have LT is just saying long-term. What are some of the ways we can be able to see God move in some of the ways of deliverance and transportation?
And we transportation, we just mean that we're in a community where, you know, Mike's telling me he's got to go pick up guys for football practice that are walking 2 or 3 miles
That is correct.
to the school. And so there's a need for transportation, but obviously we can't do that right out of the gate,
Sure.
but that's still a need for us. Now, all these things are going to take resources. So why don't you share some of the resources that we have available to us that we're engaging with?
So obviously, I think the first and primary way is us, we as a church. That's our first and I believe God is saying, God, our church body, please consider being a part of this.
And we're going to talk about the details of that in a second.
Right.
So,
and the other side of that is the district has, or the national office has what they call the Dream Incentive grant that we will begin to, as we unpack this more and be able to press into it, that there is, I believe, $25,000 grant that's available for a new mission, new opportunities for our community. So we're going to press into what that may look like. Also, we're pressing into Seaford and the church, the school district, and saying, how can we be of resource to you, but also can you provide opportunities for us to launch into these?
because we're not trying to do it alone. We want to be able to invite other churches into this process.
In fact, I believe it really is not a good thing to do this thing alone. Because, again, we are only one part of a greater community. And we want to press into some of our other churches that are a little more diverse potentially and may not look like us and talk like us, and all those sorts of things are important to me.
Yeah. And so, of course, we're going to be talking to school officials, city officials, and then if you look what the next steps are, it's funny because we're starting to search. We're looking for location. We think that having a third space is going to be really important in this. And so Mike and I did our first tour this week of a location that is a potential, and that's going to continue on for the next few months. Places that are central to where students are, where people can walk to, where they can get to, where we can invest our resources in that. And then, there's other trainings like church planning training and intercultural training and different things that we can tap into. But in our last couple of minutes, the question is, well, then what about the people here? How are they going to get involved? And so, of course, I did my typical little thing. How do you want to do that?
Yeah, so, again, as the Alliance would say, I believe Jesus said it well, is we got to be able to press into his heart, right, through prayer. Prayer is a primary work of God's people. If we want to see God move, we got to be able to press in and hear his voice, and that's through seeking his face.
And you're going to be building a prayer team for this.
That is correct. Yeah, so I'm going to be asking people here very soon to begin to join me in this moment, this mission, this assignment that God has called us to and press into. What does it look like to have a prayer team, right? This is all new to me as well. So, right, the method is going to be different. I don't know. What I do know is God has his hand on it, and that's what I want God to show and reveal to all of us.
So just like with King Jehoshaphat or Peter, we need to pray.
We need to pray.
And so the invitation isn't just going to be, hey, go home and pray about this. It's going to be a specific prayer team that gathers on a regular basis to pray. So that's one.
Yes.
Also, in the area of serving.
Yes. So again, as we begin to prepare what an outpost is going to look like, right? We're going to prepare, what does that mean to, what is that going to look like for us as a service to church, right? As we go into ESL training, perhaps, what is it going to look like for you? Maybe you have a heart to train students. Maybe you have the ability to build, right? Because the outpost will need a specific location, and we may have to go into a space that needs totally renovated. Could happen. So you may have the building skills. You may have other means to do that.
And those are going to get fleshed out as time goes on, but you're going to have the chance to either serve in preparing it or serving there, right? Both are going to be in play. But then it even goes further than that because it's actually using our resources and giving.
Yeah, so the giving, I believe, is, again, just one facet. I think sometimes we get caught up in, oh, my goodness, so you're asking me for money? I'm not asking for money. I'm asking God to do what God does. He owns it all anyway. And so for the churches, what does God call AROC to be a part of that? As we tap into resources in our community, we tap into resources at our district level, we're going to ask the church, what is it God calling us as a small church to invest into that?
New methods, new ways. It's not necessarily going to look the same, and we're going to need resources.
Yes. And the final thing I would just say is for the Outpost ministry part, right? So there's going to be some training that's going to need to be involved, which comes at a cost. There's going to be some of the things we're envisioning, perhaps could be, again, without understanding what God really wants, is, what does it look like for a computer lab? What does it look like for a sensory room for kids with different needs? What does it look like for food in preparation for the ESL training to take place? What does it look like for a kitchen? What does it look like for some of these things? And it all costs money. And we'll be foolish to just turn a blind eye to it and not seek that.
That's right. And then, of course, we're also going to need people who feel God's call to really lead into this.
Yeah. And what's really neat is about this is, again, we're not trying to take away from other organizations. We want to partner with other organizations. But God has equipped ARAC for this season, this new method, to be able to say, God matters to them and to us. And so we're going to press into, what does it mean to have a core team? What does it mean that I'm going to need people from here to say, I want to be a part of that? And be okay with saying, you know what, I really don't know what this looks like yet. It's not, right? We laugh in the office a lot. I'm a dreamer by nature. I'm not a specific person by nature. And so Weldon's my right-hand man, and a lot of this because he's like, Mike, can you just...
Yeah, Mike didn't do the PowerPoint for this.
No, not at all. But God is calling you to be a part of that, right? We have to think in terms of our gift sets and how we may look at the red, green, blue mentality, and it's how God's going to lead us into that, press into that. But also ministry teams, as we begin to unfold, we're going to need people to look at the ministry side of things. So we got our core team, then we're going to expand out to what does a ministry team look like? How do we begin to reach and meet the needs that we're targeting and working for?
And so really it comes down to this. What is God inviting you to do? What is he putting his finger on your heart? How does he want you to engage? Because here's the thing. There are people who are doing ministry currently in our church that are moving on into this, and they're leaving spots behind them. We have this issue with our youth group right now.
Yes.
Kim and Scott mentioned this when they were up here a couple months ago. God is leading them into a new season of doing some different ministry in our church, which means right now we have no direction for our youth group. We need people who will step up and say, we want to serve. And it's going to look new, and we're exploring different avenues. But friends, that's on us, collectively. And so as we go back to this, and I ask Mike to close us in prayer, understanding the times for us as a church means we need to understand what's going on. And we talked a little bit about this last week, the needs that are there, the things that are going on in our community, the stuff that God is saying, look, here are all these opportunities to bring the good news of Jesus to bear. And here's why people are doing what they're doing. You need to understand all that. And that means, go back one, God is doing something new. He's saying, look, I'm responding to this. Culture's different. Seaford's not the same as it was 40 years ago. And yet I love these people and I want to draw them to myself. And so I want you guys to work with me. And so there's going to be some new ways to do that, both inside our regular ministries here, like at Youth for Truth and Youth Group and so on, and outside at the Outpost. Our response cannot be to culture to say, well, we're just going to dominate. In other words, we're going to do it our way. You need to come to us. You need to do it our way. And the fact that you don't, that's on you. It doesn't work. We also can't isolate and say, well, we just like our church. We just want to be together. We just love being together. And we're not going to worry about, we can't do that either. But we're not going to accommodate because the good news of Jesus is what's going to change people's lives and their families and heal and bring restoration to brokenness. We're called to be salt and light, to be intimately engaged with the people around us. And when we do, your intimacy with God, your faith will grow in ways you've never seen before. God is doing that right now. And so to close, Mike, why don't you pray for us as a church that we would not only see what God is doing, but embrace what he's doing through this missional outpost.